Isn't that the greatest reality? What an incredible knowing. Unlimited in power and in peace. So what we're talking about today is activating divine will, and I want to share with you what I've been sitting with and being with in the topic of will and divine will. Thank you, Gregory, for what you shared about this idea. Well, for me, I want to share it in this way. 2 hallmarks of spiritual journey for me are unlearning and changing the way I hear words, or changing the definitions. Really what it is it's coming into a broader and deeper understanding of what I once believed to be true. So when I hear the word will, and I hear the word divine, and I think of the word willpower, it doesn't mean anything like what I once believed it to be. So in this conversation of divine will, I used to believe or experience that to mean that there was some divine being up there that had a specific will for my life. How many were taught that? I know there were some people that grew up in Unity here. And if I could just surrender to this God up there, I could be happy. Or I don't even know if happiness was even in the equation. I could be saved, right? I could be, see, because I was taught, and this is a fascinating thing, I did not grow up in a household or a religion that was teaching me that, but I picked that up in collective consciousness. There was something inherently wrong or small about me, and there was some powerful being up there that had an idea of what I was supposed to be or should be doing. I remember at a very early age picturing some God in the sky with this pad of paper. I remember feeling this as a very little kid with a good column and a bad column with little slash marks. Where did I get that? And I remember thinking at a very, very early age, I think I'm in trouble here. Now for a little beautiful child to believe somehow that there's a God up there keeping score and I was falling short, to me today holds a lot of sadness. But consciously or unconsciously, that's at least part of collective consciousness that has created that paradigm of a way of thinking that keeps us incredibly limited. What if this divinity that we're talking about isn't out there, it's in here? And more accurately, it's out there and in here. And that it's only my mind or my thinking that believes somehow I'm separate from that. And even in New Thought, we still use language that tells us it's out there. When we say God's love, right? What about God love, which is who and what each of us are? So activating divine will is simply becoming present with what is, with our own power, which is incredibly different than force, or could even be said different than will, at least in the way that we've been taught will is. And if I believe that willpower plays a role in my spirituality, this is what it probably looks like. I need to awaken now, right? That's what willpower may look like. So we could say that willpower comes from ego. Nothing wrong with that. See, because the idea of rightness and wrongness is created in the ego. And yes, we're in the middle of quite an interesting political climate. But guess what? We're always in the middle of that. And it really is what we choose to focus on. And people will sometimes say, isn't that a little Pollyanna? We are always choosing not only what we're focusing on or what we're calling it, but what we are focusing on in as the truth of who we are. So if this looks like using will to awaken, divine will, if you will, how's that? Divine will, if you will, looks more like this. See, because words are limited. And the experience of presence, or the presence of experience, is something altogether different. What if we never needed to learn another thing? What if we already know all of it? And I don't mean know all of it, but we know all of it. And this is the difference between a concept and embodying this as a way of being. So the reason that I chose activating divine will is a knowing that divine will or divinity is who and what we are, and it gets activated from within. And I want to really say that it's not really that it gets activated from within, it's that I, as Rumi says, remove the barriers that block that love. And they're really perceived barriers. And what might these barriers be? Opinion, perspective, I'm right, I know the answer. Because what that does is it takes that energy field, that beingness that we are, and it immediately limits it. And this is what science, and I love science, they're catching up with the mystics. And I mean that in a genuine way. Because science in its purest form is, let's look at this as a theory and see what's real. But how science often gets actually manifested or practiced is, I have an idea and I'm going to go find the evidence to prove that that's true. Right? Now that's not really pure science, because pure science is living in the question. That was a little bit of a tangent. So what the mystics have been teaching us for thousands of years is that the truth of who and what we are is eternal and changeless and whole and perfect. And we have this idea, this ego, this personality, these opinions that are surrounding that, and therefore we don't experience it. Do you hear how different that is than that framework that I was taught, and that I'm guessing many of us were taught? There's something wrong with you, and you need to surrender. So that, really it's so that you can be good. So that we can get more slash marks on the good side. And what was the reason for that? So we could go to heaven. What's that?
No, but I mean, people say, am I going to heaven? And they're so afraid they're not going to go.
Yeah.
So that keeps them out. Right?
It keeps them out. And what we know, did you hear that? So people are like, I'm afraid I won't go to heaven. I'm gonna change your word slightly. Tell me if I got this right. I'm afraid I won't go to heaven, and then what happens? I don't go to heaven. See, heaven's not a place or a destination. It's a moment right here. It's an experience. That's what the mystics were talking about. We call it heaven. Heaven is the pure existence, the pure awareness of the truth of who and what we are. And when I cling to a hairbreadth distinction of right and wrong, I can't experience the heaven that is. So what's the role of will and willpower as we know it and as we call it? The short answer is, and I hope this is controversial, it doesn't really have a role in the spiritual awakening. It has a wonderful role in us trying to figure out the experience of awakening, or trying to make sense of the spiritual awakening, or trying to make it happen. Right? Make it happen. And guess what? What I have seen to be true and what I've experienced to be true is it must be an important part of our evolution because a lot of us are doing it. And a lot of us are teaching it. And then there's that moment, right? Then there's that moment. A brief glimpse into reality. And I can feel in this room every time I'm here with your community that we know what I'm speaking of. See, that's not a teaching. That's a resonance. Because when we tap into something that is ultimately true, we feel it in our body. And so does that mean what the role of someone we might call a teacher, would that mean we don't use words? Maybe. I think it's the Buddha, and this is going to be a paraphrase. You know, I love paraphrasing the great masters. If we truly understood the beauty of a flower, we would be awake. The world is a miraculous place. All we have to do is let go of everything we've ever believed. Decide that we no longer need opinions. And become like little children, and that really is it. See, little children come into this world knowing that until we teach them to forget. And how do we teach them to forget? Will. We use our will over them. So here's the tricky part. If we take this beautiful baby that's born whole and perfect and leave them alone, what happens? They die. So there must be some role in this ego world, this thing we call humanity. So what this baby really needs in order to survive, and as I'm saying this, I want you to imagine either a child in your life or your child that's in your life. What they need is love and connection. More accurately, what they're hungry for is us reflecting that which they know. In other words, what they need is us to forget and unlearn all the programming that we've been taught that took us away from this, and yet still be able to protect them in some way in the world. And when I say protect, I don't mean protect from some sort of enemy, but give them the food and the shelter. But what's happened in our society, and in particular in America, is that we have forgotten that the more important one is the beingness, not the food and the shelter. So here we are, wherever we are in our life's journey, whether we're 15 or 1500. I know one day we're going to live to be like a lot older than we are now, because that keeps happening, right? It keeps happening. Here we are, perfectly imperfect. And what I mean by that is, we are whole and perfect, absolutely. That is the truth. And in relative reality, we have all these imperfections. My invitation to you, and what I'm going to close with, is it closing time? Oh, I have a few more minutes. Oh my gosh, no, it isn't. So here's what I want to ask. Does anyone have a question, a comment, or a smart remark about what I just said?
God bless you.
Oh, thank you. Any questions, any comments? I'm serious about that. Yes, Dave.
We've had some wonderful perceptions or facets on the political atmosphere going on right now with
Yeah.
a couple of candidates. What is your perspective?
What is my what?
Perspective.
Your thoughts.
Your thoughts.
So in the human realm, I have a whole lot of perspectives. As a matter of fact, I think one of them has it right and one of them has it wrong. But guess what? In the realm of spirit, there is no rightness and wrongness. Now, we live in this world, and this is such a perfect example. As soon as I've decided that one of them is wrong, what does that concretize? Separation, fear. I need to do something to make this right. I probably need to give my opinions about this. As a matter of fact, I need to give my opinions to as many people as will listen about how this person is wrong. And that may have a place. So what would the evolved perspective look like in politics? I'll say it this way. Politics is one of the lowest forms of consciousness. Because it is built on the idea of I need to have the right answer and do the right thing. And now we're living in, and this has probably always been true, it feels more pronounced that we're no longer saying this is what I stand for, but this is what I stand against. Right. Now, standing for something, if I say, I want someone in public office that is going to embody the idea of love, the idea, the principle of compassion. We've had a president that I think embodied that really well. We've had a couple that come to mind. At some point, we, America, will have to own what we've been doing in the world. Right? At some point we will. Yeah. Because that's what happens in our own individual spiritual journeys. Right? I can't experience my own divinity as long as I'm holding on to the rightness and wrongness and the harm that I've caused in the world. Now, at a deeper level, there's nothing to forgive ever. That's the conversation we've been in, right? Because in the mystical realm, nothing needs to change in order for me to experience peace. So here's the thing with the political environment, if you will. There's no solution there, ultimately. And we can play in that arena in whatever way we're called. We can go vote our conscience or not. I'm of the belief that it will probably help in relative reality if we all vote our conscience. But here's the thing, true freedom lies in not having that hairbreadth distinction. True freedom. True freedom is absolutely knowing, completely, not knowing, but knowing that we're already that. There is no enemy except for in my ego. So people will often say to me, well, how do we live that? Moment by moment by moment. If I notice my mind, or when I notice my mind, having perspective, I can return to that center. Because what happens because what I was hoping for, I'm going to say what I was hoping for. I was hoping that I would do these teachings a certain way, I would do the affirmations in a certain way, and I would have this awakening experience, and I would no longer have my human reality. I would no longer have a mind or a perspective. I would always be in bliss. Doesn't it sound good? It sounds so rich and so wonderful. Well, guess what? It is true that we can live in that bliss, but it doesn't, at least at my level of awareness or my level of evolution, it doesn't mean that I no longer have perspectives. What it means is that I no longer believe that that's the truth. In other words, I can witness that as pure consciousness. The witness, I am the witness that sees that. As Eckhart Tolle says, what a liberation to realize I'm not the voice in my head. Who am I then? The one who sees that. So I know at Unity we talk a lot about perspective and how perspective influences our life. And it's true on one level. And then there's this other level of beingness where we land in a place, rediscover or have the great remembering of this place that's beyond perspective. And see, from there, there's nothing that I need to manifest. And of course, what we know, the paradox is that when I arrive there, the outside world seems to start lining up. All of a sudden, I'm living the life of my dreams, both internally and externally. And if that shifts in outer reality, I have a choice to return to this greater reality. So people will often ask me then, well, then should we not have opinions or perspective? And my answer is, do you want to be free? Do I want to be free? Do I want to experience the freedom that I am? Now, we all have different programming, and this really is what I'm going to close with. We all have different programming, if you will, or life experiences. Some of us have more, as Eckhart Tolle, I'm on him for some reason today, have denser pain bodies. You know, if someone comes into our world and born African American, for example, like my dear friend who was born in the South, I don't know how old she is because I never ask a woman's age, but I know she grew up in a time where she was told to not be on the sidewalk if a white person walks toward her. I don't know what that experience is like, and it would be arrogant for me to say I do. What I do know is, whatever our life experience is, we both honor it, we want to honor that experience, and also recognize that each of us have things to unlearn so that we can return to that greater reality. Right? That greater truth that is beyond appearance. The invisible realm, as we talked about last time I was here, and the visible realm. In the visible realm, all of this does exist, and we have to work through it, and we go to therapy, and we go to the workshops. If we're going with an intention to get somewhere or strive to be somewhere or learn something, we might want to look at shifting that to the unlearning paradigm, if you will. Let me allow that which is in the unconscious to come into conscious awareness so that I can know that I have a choice. As Carl Jung says, when it lives in the unconscious, it's running our life and we call it fate. It's only when we bring it into conscious awareness that we recognize we have a choice. And maybe that's what we mean by activating divine will. That divine will is absolutely knowing that we are divine. We simply let it be, let it emerge, and live that way in the world. What a blessing, right? Doesn't it sound so much easier and simpler? I think it is.
I think you should come home with me.
Okay, let's go. Thank you so much. We're going to close with that because I can't say anything more than that. Thank you.